Welcome to the 4 Habits podcast, where we help you build relationships that thrive at home, at work, and in life. We're Dr. Andrea and John Taylor-Cummings, and every week we bring you actionable insights to create meaningful connections and lasting success. So let's dive in.
Well, welcome. And today we have the joy of being in conversation with the host of the podcast, Dad Mind Matters, a really important conversation around men, dads, and mental health and how to juggle busy lives, marriage, parenting, the lot. So welcome, James.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. I'm absolutely honored to be on your podcast.
Oh, we're really looking forward to diving in. But as our audience knows, before we do, John's going to share a bit more of the background so everybody will understand the caliber of person we're in conversation with.
Absolutely, and some of the fabulous experience that he has in this space. So let me do this. James Macdonald is the creator and host of Dad Mind Matters, a heartfelt podcast dedicated to navigating the real-world challenges of parenting, marriage, and mental health. And as we're talking with James ahead of the show here, that is really the passion there, and we'll see that coming through. A happily married father of 3, James lives on the south coast of the UK near Brighton.
And we've been promised an ice cream when we visit.
Definitely, with a flake.
Okay,
Yeah, I've just upgraded it.
Now, his own long journey with mental health struggles inspired him to write 2 supportive books, First Time Dad, and also One Dad and His Dog. Love the title of that one there. Offering encouragement and practical strategies for dads who may be facing similar challenges. With nearly 300 podcast episodes and a growing audience on YouTube and podcast platforms, James shares honest reflections, practical tools, and hopeful messages for busy professionals trying to balance family, work, and personal well-being. Through his grounded storytelling and emphasis on emotional resilience, he invites listeners to embrace the beautiful mess of modern family life and build stronger, healthier relationships. So now our audience can see exactly why we have James on the show here today, because we love talking about some of these challenges here. In fact, James, there are 2 very dear friends of ours who have become, well, one's just become a dad, one's about to become a dad, and I think 10 days, 9 days, something like that.
Fantastic.
What can they look forward to on this journey of fatherhood from your perspective?
Yeah.
I think, the reason I wrote the book First Time Dad is that it's for a man especially. I think the change the minute becoming a parent is so night and day different. I think, from my understanding, for a woman, you've got 9 months to an extent to kind of get used to this, and obviously, from day one, you've got a relationship with the child that you're growing. Yeah. And I suddenly found that literally 1 minute my daughter wasn't there, and then 1 minute she was, and you're presented this small crying baby, and you have to put it in a massive nappy, and your life is instantly 180-degree change. You can't, and I think it's a massive shock to the system, a wonderful shock. Don't get me, I think becoming a parent and becoming a dad is the thing I'm most proud of anything I've done in my life. Wow. Because actually, I think it's the one area in your life that actually is the most important, if I'm honest. Yeah. If I look back on my life, I want people to go, it's not important to me if I don't become a millionaire or a huge, success financially. If people look back and say, he was a good dad and he did everything he could with the time and resources, that's enough for me.
Yeah. Where it really matters, right?
I think so. I think the advice for new dads, I think, and any parents is patience and communication and kindness. I'd probably put kindness first, because you're about to go through, both you and your partner are about to go through, because really, to an extent, once the baby, when the baby's not here, it's not as difficult. When the baby's here, suddenly you've got all this new person who's actually more important to you than you are in your own life, which is a weird concept. And just things like, you suddenly underestimate how valuable sleep was a resource.
Indeed.
I've never had a conversation with a parent where sleep hasn't come up as a conversation, because it's terrifying if you suddenly think. I remember the first time, I think a week after Grace was born, she's our oldest, going back to work and thinking, I'm so tired. I don't know if I should be driving. This is not good.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, we've got 3 children. She's nearly 13. So we've had a decade of parenting experience, and kindness is the one thing. Kindness and the sense of humor, I think. And I think that's probably a good, maxim for life, because
Indeed.
things are going to get thrown at you, especially as a parent. If you can kind of just be kind to the other person, even when it's not your go, to go and get the milk or change the bins or do the night feed, if you can say, actually, instead of getting cross or bitter or resentful, I'm gonna empower myself I'm gonna become the best dad there is. I'm gonna become like super dad, because that's a much more positive way than, yet again I've had to do this, because it will affect your marriage, absolutely, your partner, your relationship. It will. It just does. And I think it'll either gel you and you'll really bind and strengthen you, or unfortunately these things can push you apart. So
yeah, 100%, because this project of the new baby is probably for many people the first time you really have to do team. Up until then, we can, if you're married, you can pretend like you have become one, but be doing your own thing and living very independent lives and not having to pull together the way that you suddenly have to when there's this baby in the mix and life gets busy. And I love the way you described it, the beautiful mess of family life, because it can feel like that sometimes, right?
It's complete chaos. And I actually think if you really lean into the chaos and kind of celebrate it and be really honest when people ask you how you are, just say, this is incredibly hard. Because actually, all that does is empower other parents who are probably just as exhausted, overwhelmed, to go, oh, thank goodness I'm not the only one. And that breaks down the barriers, because I think the problem with things like social media and Instagram, it's all filtered and no one believes it. I don't believe it. If you're a new parent, you are probably hanging on by your fingernails.
Yeah.
And actually, the thing I found is the more honest you are, especially as a parent and a new parent, the more that inspires people around to go, well, I can help you out. I can do the school run. Or I can bring you around a meal. Or I can go and get some milk. Or let's go for a beer or a coffee. It just, that I've never felt such a sense of support and love from complete strangers the minute they found out I was a new dad.
Wow. So, James, what is it that you found the most challenging, and what have you learned to do to cope with it?
I think I knew that becoming a dad would just the extra energy and lack of sleep would potentially have an negative impact on my mental health. And I just thought you need to have a really strict routine of things you do to keep you on an even keel. Because, and I think I got a bit more. So for things, I mean, I've got 5 musts of things I do every day. So I have a cold shower every day. I hate having a cold shower, but if I wake up anxious or feeling a bit down, that physical reset, just, you can't, that's one of the most helpful things. Things like when you become a parent, you're not going to have the time to go and get to the gym in the same way. But the things you can do, like for example, as a parent, you'll find you are reheating tea and coffee a lot.
Yep. Microwave comes in very helpful.
And I find, something as silly as every time I reheat my coffee for a minute, I do some press-ups or some body squats or whatever. That's free. And I don't have to leave my kitchen to do that. And it feels like, okay, I'm managing some sort of, and then things like, go for a walk around the block, but do it every day. Do some meditation, but do it every day. And I think also maybe if you've got a creative project, whether it's a podcast or a book, chip away at it, because I think you can feel lost as a parent. You can suddenly just become, I'm just, Grace, William, and Jack's dad. That people don't even know my name. I think you can feel utterly invisible.
Yeah, indeed.
And I think it's really important to have something, a hobby or a creative outlet that you feel, yeah, but that's mine. That's me.
Yeah.
So you don't feel lost.
Well, I was going to say, just pushing on that point for a little bit, and I like to be a little bit controversial here sometimes, because sometimes what you're talking about there is for us to succeed and get through this stuff, we've got to do some slightly selfish things here to succeed. We've got to look after self. If everything is all about giving, then we're going to feel drained and there's nothing left. How do you find that balance between getting to the end of that giving and the kindness you were talking about earlier? Because sometimes you feel like I'm just so shattered, haven't got any energy left, but I'm still having to be kind as well. How do you manage that balance there? How easy is it to do that?
Yeah, that's not easy because we're all human beings and we're all a very complex, cocktail of emotions. And, well, for the moment, I now work from home. I work from home, I do the majority. I do the drop-offs and the pickups. And my wife, she's a teacher, she works all day. And there are times sometimes when, probably because she's had a tough day, she might come in and notice the one piece of housework I haven't done. I think the best, and it's, the best thing I would say is communication is absolutely key. And more so when you are really struggling, tired and stressed. So sometimes just bite your tongue as opposed to jumping down someone's throat because you don't know how tough their day has been. But in regards to, sorry, I'm trying to come back to, in regards to your question, the best analogy I've ever heard is when you're on an airplane and they say, in a case of emergency, you need to put your oxygen mask on first. If I'm not in a position, like mentally and physically, to be a good parent, what sort of parenting, what sort of dad or husband am I presenting?
Yeah.
So, because there were definitely times when I go to, I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, or, times I've gone away with my friends for a weekend. I do feel guilty, but I think, but I will come back refreshed and therefore I'll be better. You need to do that. You need to prioritize your partner's hobbies and don't resent them and don't. They are important. You and your partner are like you're running a small business, and actually, if you two don't work, it doesn't work.
Indeed.
And it's difficult. It is difficult, but make sure that you prioritize your partner's hobbies, whatever they need to do to show up and be as happy as they can be in this wonderfully chaotic life. Make sure that's a priority.
That's such a powerful point because it's so easy to be sucked into the busyness of life that you forget to see the person who you're married to or partnered with. You forget to see the things that light them up and be there for them in the way that you used to. You just end up being very functional together rather than really relational in the way that you support. So I really love that point. Why is it, if you're happy to talk about it, why is it that these 5 musts or this intentionality about looking after your own mental health was important to you, or how did you learn to do that? Because that's a big thing for men right now.
Yeah, I think I knew myself. I knew I need a structure. I need something that every day, irrespective of what else has gone in the day, there's 5 things that I do that are helping me mentally, physically, spiritually. It's so on those days where you just feel like I can't do this. Today's been all right. I've go, no, it hasn't. You've done your 5 things.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter what else goes on because stuff's going to happen. The car's going to break down, or your kid's ill and they've got to stay off school, and which means that the big meeting you've had can't happen. That's going to happen. So it helped me have a structure. It doesn't matter what your structure is. I think it's knowing what actually helps, what actually gets me out of bed, gets me moving forward, just putting one foot in front of the other, and write it down. And it doesn't have to be 5 things. It might be 1 thing. There might be 3 things. It doesn't matter. But I think that helps you feel like, well, I'm progressing as James Macdonald, just the person, as opposed to the dad. I think if you don't have that structure, everything else will struggle a bit.
Yeah.
I don't think you shared all 5, but certainly you mentioned physically, mentally, emotionally. Is there a relational one in there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of just, make sure that when my wife comes in, ask her about her day, but ask her in a way that I actually am invested, not how was your day, and then not really listening for the answer. You can't underestimate how texting your wife a nice message, just text your wife, I love you. It's never gonna be a bad thing. And I think you need to remind yourself, I'm really lucky to have a wife who is going out to work, and someone hearing that, you can never hear that enough ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's only going to make them go, that was a nice thing to do. I know he's having a tough time. I know the kids are probably driving him mad at home. But he's taken some time to tell me he's proud of what I'm doing. And that only makes them want to do the same. And I think you just, it enforces you're a team. Because I think
and there for each other.
Yeah.
Having each other's back.
Because I think that's the problem. Kids are incredibly clever. Can I have a biscuit? No. You go and ask mummy, can I have a biscuit? I mean, they'll play you off each other. There's nothing more powerful than a united couple.
Indeed.
And that's the only way it works. And I think it's very difficult when you're like, I feel like I've been doing all the work at the moment. I feel a bit resentful and a bit, but actually go, no, okay, instead of being, the energy I'm spending being bitter is utterly pointless. Use that energy to go, right, I'm going to become an absolute ninja when it comes to doing the laundry. Or my wife's going to come out and go, oh my goodness, the house is so clean. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm so amazing that I've got to raise my game a bit. I need to be as equally amazing. And actually doing it that way is a really positive way, because it's like, I can be better. You can always be a little bit better.
That brings up a really interesting point, because what you're describing is this kind of the trend in the shift in traditional roles. The expectations of what the man does, what the woman does, is completely kind of up for grabs in the way that we live and work now. What issues
relative to what it was
absolutely
years ago?
Yeah.
So what challenges has that brought? What have you seen or heard from the dads around you making the transition or dealing with the more fluid roles or the expectations of how to do life now?
I think it's difficult, because I think I'd be lying if I didn't say. I mean, I've been made redundant twice in the past 2 years. There's definitely an element of you can feel emasculated just because of the way we've been brought up. My father went to work. My mother, looked after the children and managed the house. So in me, in my DNA, in my narrative, that's probably what it should be. So suddenly I'm picking up and dropping off children and doing the laundry and not glamorous stuff and not stuff people can see.
Yeah.
That, even irrespective of how good a handle you've got on your ego, that's going to affect you.
Yeah.
Not stuff you get paid for either. There's no money coming in for that stuff.
Yeah.
No, there's not. But you notice it when it doesn't happen, and that's the problem.
Everybody notices when it doesn't happen.
You run out of underwear by Wednesday if no one does any washing. I mean, and that's the problem. And it's but it's the unglamorous behind the scenes. I'm doing this so that my wife doesn't have to. And it is difficult, because there's a part of you thinks, well, what does that mean? And how does my wife view me? And, and that's hard. The best advice I think would talk to other men, because you're probably much harder on yourself than other people actually. And your view of yourself is probably not what other people think. And I think it's amazing that you're doing this. And I feel very lucky that I've got a wife who goes out to work and loves her job, certainly in the present economic climate, and just kind of go, okay, it might not be ideal in your mind, but what's much worth is, what if she didn't have that job? That would be a very scary proposition. So, okay, just if this is the role that you have, just smash it. Just be the best stay-at-home dad, so that to the extent where her friends are going to go, your husband's on it. He is absolutely, just celebrate that. But it's not easy. And I think, and it's certainly changed. It's not the role that my dad did at all. And because of it, and I think it'll be much more normal for my boys if they end up working from home and being house husbands. We're at that kind of changeover where it still feels a bit like, should I be doing this?
Yeah.
And is that something that you have conversations about, or you just taking charge and you just do the house thing?
We have conversations about it. I think it's very obvious if my wife's brilliant in that she'll do, she works full time, but she'll also do a lots of the housework and stuff. I think there isn't men and women's work. There's
Yeah.
just work. And I think that's the thing. We need to get away from, oh, well, that's a a husband job or a wife. No, there's just work.
Yeah.
Just talk about it. I mean, I think play to your strengths. If there are things you're particularly good at, let that person be good at. But just keep talking about it and celebrating other people's things. You know, you might not care that that clean clothes are put on the bed, but it might really wind up your wife. So just don't do it. Just irrespective of your thoughts on the matter, just be the bigger person. Because
no, some brilliant advice there, and it's the real world that we live in now. It's how you need to keep talking about who needs to do what, so that both parties and the whole household can function and people feel supported. What trends have you noticed around men and mental health and this whole managing the tensions between a busy professional life, marriage, being a good parent? What are the challenges there that have been escalating concerns over men's mental health, you think?
Overwhelming for many.
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of I've spoken on before. I mean, my job before, I used to work for the Brighton City Council. I was a seafront officer, and we used to work. We were all first responders, and our main job was to manage the lifeguard service in the lifeguard season, and out of season, we were the lifeguard service. So, and it really startled me how many of the incidents we were called to were mental health related, suicide related, and men. And men, specifically the demographic of men, I would say 30 to 50, that demographic.
Wow.
And the fact that suicide is the biggest killer of men, I think, sort of the 45 to 55 bracket, it just seems startling in what's supposed to be a civilized society. It seems insane. And I think, and that's ultimately in that, and it probably resonates more with me because I've struggled with depression and OCD. So it probably, I kind of feel like, well, you know, with some bad decisions and bad luck, that could have been me. That could have, I think that's why it resonated. And that's ultimately what inspired me to set up a podcast and write 2 books on the subject. I still think that we've made massive progress in talking about mental health, but I think it's difficult because I think it's difficult not to feel emasculated, and it's still not really socially acceptable for a man to put his hands up and go, "Oh, I'm struggling and need some help." To give you an example, if we saw, when I was working as a seafront officer, if I saw a woman crying on a park bench or on a seafront bench, I'll probably go and talk to her. If I saw a man, that's more of a potential threat, that you're more likely to call the police, you know, because you're more worried about, well, where's that going to go? I think, and I do I want to tell my wife that I'm struggling? Probably not, really, if I'm honest, because you're like, well, how will that make her view me? You know, that might further make me emasculated, especially if your role might be reversed, where you work from home or you do that element of the work. And the thing the best way I've heard it said is that men support each other shoulder to shoulder, as opposed to women support each other face to face. And I think that's perfect. Don't make mental health the thing when you're talking about men. You know, I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've got some really good friends there. It's very rare that we talk about mental health, but we'll talk about something else, a topic that's kind of acceptable, to the extent where they feel trusted and I feel safe here, that if they were having a tough time, they'd say, "Have you got 5 minutes after class, or any chance we go for a coffee?" I think that's the way to do it.
To build a friendship.
I mean, that's certainly what you're saying there is really helpful. And I think for people who have their eyes open and are keen to support others who are going through mental health challenges, fantastic. What about for the people who are actually going through those challenges themselves? They're feeling the overwhelm. What can they do to, you know, they don't want to put it out there and say, "Look, I'm struggling, guys. I'm having some. Can you help me?" But what can they do to get help? How do you encourage and support people there?
Yeah, that's important, because I think that's the problem. If men spoke openly and were more comfortable about sharing their feelings, then we wouldn't have the statistics that we sadly have.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. And I've certainly, and it's especially difficult if you work from home and therefore you don't talk to other adult men.
Yeah.
If I didn't go and train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu twice a week, I wouldn't talk to adult men. I just wouldn't.
No.
So it's really important for men to have friendships. And I'm very lucky, and I've got a supportive wife who will sometimes, boot me out the house to say, go for a run, go and see so-and-so, even because I think the problem is, and this is certainly the case, I feel like if I'm struggling, I tend to retreat. I tend to go into my cave and I don't. And that's the worst thing you can do. Yeah. And the idea of even going outside and going and sitting and talking to a friend when you physically just don't feel like it's what you want to do, it's difficult. It's hard. So I think you've got I think hopefully listening to podcasts like this will make you feel, it will normalize it, which might then lead you to go, do you know what? It's better that I put my hands up and admit I'm struggling and I get to keep going in my life than I let this beat me. I think for me as a man, I think it's say, do you know, I'm going to beat it. I think if you can sort of think of your mental health as something to overcome, that for me it empowered me as a man as opposed to made me feel weak as a man. Well, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to find a solution and I'm going to do it. And it's going to be a more of a heroic overcoming of my mental health as opposed to that just helped for me.
Well, if we could go back a couple of conversations, what do you think is triggering this increase in mental health concerns that we're seeing? What's the cause? What are the things that are kind of pushing men to contemplate suicide?
I think just the world has never been more chaotic than it is now. I mean, just sadly, it all comes down to economics. And I'm not an economist, but I think the fact that two adults have to work full time and it's still not enough, that's terrifying. And I think that's a big problem. I think that's triggering when you feel out of control. I don't know how to control this. It's not even, I'm doing my best and it's still not enough. That's scary, I think. Sorry, I forgot your...
No, the question was what do you think is driving or escalating mental health concerns? So finances is clearly one.
Finances is one. I think just the uncertainty of the world. And I think to an extent, there were probably these uncertainties when I was growing up in the 70s, but that we didn't have 24-hour news. So I wasn't told about every single terrible thing that's going on in the world minute by minute, which a human being has a finite amount of, well, hang on a minute, I've got to process that, plus the fact that I didn't sleep very well because maybe the kids cut me, or I'm worried about the boiler that I've got to pay for. So that's overwhelming. I think human beings just have an overwhelming amount of information that we're not prepared. So I think, and then you've got things like AI. Is a robot going to take my job in 5 years' time? Well, that's going to keep you up at night. Any one of those things is enough. You put them together, then we have a finite amount of ability to deal with stress. And I think we'll look back on this period and go, well, that was not dissimilar to the Great Depression. That was. How did the people in the Great Depression feel? Probably pretty depressed. I mean, it sounds ridiculous and I'm not making light of it, but I think those
against us to deal with. Yeah.
But I think that the antidote for me is go, right, okay, man, what can I physically control? Right. Well, and certainly things like finances, I literally went down with a fine-tooth comb with my incomings and outgoings. Right. Well, you don't need those subscriptions or those apps. Just because you might suddenly find, okay, well, it's not great, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. Get more information. Do you know the whole story? And then, okay, right, that's taken the edge off it, because sometimes you don't need to completely fix it. You just need to take the edge off, and then talk to your partner and have a plan. And then in a weird way, it's become an adventure as opposed to this terrifying monster you've got to overcome. You're like, well, this is something we're going to overcome. And when we look back and our 3 children have all grown up, we're going to be like, that made us that decade. That decade was really hard, but it made us, we learned a whole load of skills that we didn't know we could do. It really strengthened us as a couple. and also it showed fantastic examples of resilience to our children.
Yeah. And a lot of what you said, you know, talking to your partner and being able to deal with a problem from the same side, that depends on a really strong relationship. Where did you get your skills to do to build such a strong relationship? Because maybe that's part of the problem as well.
Maybe. I think I'm lucky. I'm married to a primary school teacher. So, she probably sometimes feels like she has an extra child plus the dog. But in a way, she's good at that. I was probably attracted to her for a number of those qualities. And that's okay. I think what I would love, somebody who's read one of my books or the podcast, is to just go, right, I'm a man and it's okay to not be okay. That's becoming normalized. It doesn't mean I'm any weaker than another man. It just means it's okay to go, do you know what? At the moment, at 48 years of age, I need some help so that I can continue and become the hero of my story. If that means putting my hand up and saying, can someone help me out here? Even if it's just can listen to me for 5 minutes. All that I found that will do when you do that, whether it's to someone at work or whether it's, even anonymously on social media, on a Facebook group, all that's happened is I have a number of other men go, mate, well done for doing that. I admire that you had the courage to do that. Yeah. All the things that you're terrified about, people go, God, getting hate or getting abuse doesn't happen. It's in your head. And actually, if it does happen, you're just going to get more support.
Yeah.
I think you have to have that conversation with your partner, because it's not fair to live, because your partner will know. Your wife will know exactly what's going on. And I think what's scarier for probably your partner and your children is knowing that dad is struggling and he's really quiet and I don't know why. That's much scarier than dad going, just to let you know, kids, I'm sorry if I'm quiet at the moment. I'm having a bit of a tough time. They're going to have tough times. And then they'll be like, well, do you know what? Dad went through tough times and he admitted it and he owned it. And it wasn't the end of him. If anything, it was the making of him. So you have to be brave first, unfortunately.
Have those conversations.
I was going to say, just to finish, it's an interesting shift in expectations. I think part of the problem is the mindset or the narrative we tell ourselves about what it means to be a man, and the expectations that have traditionally been put on men's shoulder about how to behave, stiff upper lip, never cry, never show your emotions. All of that needs to be unraveled to deal with the world as we know it now. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to think, what would I prefer? Am I going to be so full of pride that I let this beat me? Or am I going to potentially be vulnerable? And all that will do is inspire other men who are struggling to be vulnerable. There needs to be a generation of men who go, do you know what? I don't care if people think I'm weak or this, I'm just going to do it. Because actually, what's really helped me is you'll be so much braver for your children than you will be for yourself. It's amazing. You'll find, to your friend who's about to become a parent, you'll be surprised the drive you get as a dad. And that for me was one of the things. All dads go, I remember when my daughter was born and we lived in a small 2-bed basement flat. And I thought, this isn't good enough. This needs to get better. And that drive that I got it's rocket fuel. And that's the love of a child is the only thing that can do that. Sorry, I completely forgot your first.
You're right. It's the change in the mindset, forgetting the expectations of what it means to be a man, being willing to be vulnerable and so on. Yeah.
It's being vulnerable. We need to be, and that's a wonderful thing to be. I think to go, because I think as a man, if you can kind of, I'm going to attack this, and therefore is a better way. It's more empowering for me to go, I'm going to attack this thing, and I've made it a separate entity to me. My mental health is something that I'm going to beat. I'm going to overcome it. And actually, sorry, I now remember what I was going to say. I do this when I'm struggling. When I do this because I think my daughter or my sons are going to have a time in their life. They need this example. They're going to need this lesson. And I want this to be the lesson. If all this does is them go, because my dad had a nervous breakdown in his 40s, and I remember him having a really tough time. And probably because he was brought up, in the same expectation. You don't talk about your feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly
Yeah.
if you're British, and certainly if you're a man.
Yeah.
Well, why not? Because actually, if you did, you'd probably have a much happier life beyond. So I think that's the best advice I give to anyone, especially if you're a parent. If you're scared to do something, do it. Go, well, actually, I need to do it. It's not I want to do this. I need to do this for my children. My children need to see this example, not only of me going, I've got the strength of character and emotional intelligence to say I need some help, but the example of the resilience and strength I'm going to show by fixing it will be like, wow, that's legacy stuff. That's stuff that they'll go. I can still remember the few times my dad, who I know is having a tough time, did brave things. Those they drive me on, I imagine.
I'm smiling to myself here as you're talking, because our friend is going to recognize himself in this one here, because we were talking to him the other day. Child isn't even born yet, and he's saying, oh, the things I'm having to do here now, the house is too small, he's knocked down a wall, he's done some carpentry. He's like, I've never done this sort of stuff before. So stepping up, absolutely.
And that's empowering, because you'll suddenly find all these skills you have to do, and it won't be perfect first time, but it will be better than not doing it at all. And you learn more about yourself by becoming a parent. It will challenge you in ways and all I would say is that when you get cross or you make a mistake, just own it. The number of times I've gone up to my kids and said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get cross with you. I'm just dad. You explain to them, I think, and so it's not just communication with your wife or your partner, it's communication with your children. People know, if people, there's nothing scarier than knowing someone you love is struggling, but you don't know why. That's scary. I'd much rather my children or my wife go, this is why I'm sad, and this is why I reacted like that. Because I can do something with that. I might be able to help you with that. I might not, but at least I know what it is.
And not internalize it and then get into a blame game and nobody's supporting anybody anymore.
I wanted to pick up on one other support mechanism, which you touched on so far but not gone into. Your other book, One Dad and His Dog. Tell me about that. What part of that dog had to play?
One Dad and His Dog. Growing up, we had dogs. We always had dogs, and my kids, I think certainly since in COVID, lots of people got dogs. We didn't get a dog in COVID because I always said, look, it's not fair on a dog, because actually, until you have one adult working at home, a dog is like a child. It will ruin your house because it's unhappy if you leave it on its own. So. But we got a dog when I went, I had a full-time job working from home, and actually it coincided that I think 3 or 4 months after a dog, I lost my job, and that was a really scary time. And I found that actually the positive impact it had on my mental health was huge. I went out for a walk every day. It made me walk for, the number of times I thought, I don't want to go for a walk, it's raining, or I just can't be bothered. There was a dog, a little bit like in the same way that when you become a parent, you were inspired. I've got to get better. I've got to find a way to get better. The dog, and just the it's like having a newborn again, and kind of just the managing a dog who needs you to clean up its poo and just do stuff. And actually, but also the love you get from a dog. And so I wrote a book about that because, and it's a similar sort of, the first time dad book's a 40-week guide to kind of, supporting your partner, but also your and her mental health. This is a 20-week guide to, accepting welcoming a golden retriever puppy into your house. And she's lovely, and she's helped every member of our family in very different ways. Animals can be fantastic for your mental health, I think. I've probably saved thousands in therapy by having a dog.
Well, like I spotted that. I thought part of your support network there, having that dog in the mix. I'm conscious of time. How do people who want to hear a little bit more, James, what can they, resources to point them to? Clearly, they're the books. What else? How can people find out more about you and the work you're doing?
Well, I've got my I've actually recently, sorry, I just should have told you this. I've recently changed the name of the podcast from Dad Mind Matters to Dad's Mental Health. But it actually comes up as the same in our podcast. And I did this largely because I think when you speak about the one thing that, of course, I want to help and support people on subjects of parenting and marriage. But if I'm honest, it's mental health which is the driver, and dad's mental health. That's the one thing that I would, because it's something I've battled with for 20 years. I would consider myself something. I'm only an expert on my own mental health, but telling my stories, someone that will resonate with someone else. They could dad's mental health, or I think you still put Dad My Matt and Apple podcast. It comes up. I've also got a YouTube channel where I talk about how training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as a dad who's near 50 and fairly rubbish at it. But it's important to have your own thing. Have your thing. It doesn't matter what the thing is. It just needs, and because then you're not. It's wonderful to become a husband or a wife or a parent, but you need your own individuality. It's important.
Don't get lost. What I love about our conversation and the way that you roll, James, is that by being you are giving so many men permission to be themselves as well, to be raw, to be vulnerable, to be honest, to take charge of the things that you can take charge, to accept the things that you have no control over, but still find a way to move forward. What, as a kind of parting thought, is there anything that we've not touched on that you thought, I really want to share this with people out there before I go? Is there any one thought that's nagging?
Firstly, that's really kind. I really appreciate your sentiment. And likewise, what you're doing is there's that sort of Aerosmith quote. I think, the light at the end of the tunnel may be you. Never assume how important you might be. I think if you see people doing good things like on social media, just tell them. You have no idea how important that might be. But actually the best, I think you wanted, I think there was a quote about advice on relationships, and it's advice that my dad, who sadly passed away a few years ago, said in a speech in his 70th on his 70th birthday, in front of lots of children, grandchildren, friends, and he worked in insurance for 30 years, and it always stuck with me to the extent where actually I made it the kind of I dedicated it the book to him, First Time Dad, and put the quote in it. Is that he said, after 30 years of insurance and numerous insurance policies, the best insurance you can get against life is positive and loving relationships.
Wow.
And it's on the money. I mean, it is the more time you invest in relationships, whether that's your partner or your children or your friends, that will protect you and secure you against just the stuff in life you can't possibly prepare for. That would be my takeaway.
Do you know, it's as if we could have paid you to give that line and you've given it for free. Amazing. Well, you the examples that you've given, the way you talk about how you handle life and the conversations with your partner, you started there, didn't you? Communication, patience, and kindness.
Love that.
Which is all about how you interact with and relate with the people who are important in your life, because that shores you up for everything else.
I think it's very difficult. Marriage and any relationships are difficult, irrespective. And I think, and it's very difficult not to sometimes get resentful or cross. But actually, the worst thing that you can do is go inside and not voice that. And actually, I think, and this is a big generalization, but I think men are doers. Men like doing stuff and fixing stuff. And if you can just say, well, instead of getting cross that my wife's not done or not said this, you can say, well, I can help fix this. I can make our relationship amazing so that she feels utterly supportive and loved. And together, when we will look back, make the goal. I want us to get to an end of a life when A, we're still together, and B, we've launched our children. We've done everything we could with the time and resources. And the only way you're going to do that is if you do it together. That's the strength in your unionship.
Amazing. What a note to end on. James, it's been a joy just having this conversation with you. We wish you all the very best in the work that you're doing, and, continue having an amazing impact on everybody, but particularly on men and their mental health, dads in particular. Thank you.
echo all
Thank
of
you. I
that.
really enjoyed it. It's been really nice to talk to you. I felt like, it's just, I mean, that's the wonderful thing about something like a podcast.
Yeah.
We're probably like-minded people, and you can end up having a conversation. You feel like, I've known them for a long time.
Indeed.
Well, we're in the same sphere. We ultimately, you set up a podcast because you want to help people. Well, that's a really good starting point.
Yeah. Awesome.
I know so many people around the world are going to be inspired by this.
Indeed.
First-time dads in particular, but long-time dads as well. There's so much to learn and pick up from, and
Men
stuff
in
that
general.
men
Dad or
in
not,
general, taking away from this. So thank you, James.
You're welcome.
Thanks to our audience around the world for tuning in yet again. We love doing these shows. Lots of different perspectives. Let us know what else you'd like to hear about. Send us an email, hello@the4habits.com. Let us know what you'd like to hear. We'll see who else we can get in the not quite hot seat,
but in the room with us,
in the room with us,
conversation.
in the conversation space. But for now, it's bye-bye and God bless.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the 4 Habits podcast. Now, if today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, take our free relationship skills quiz at the4habits.com/skills quiz to start improving your relationships today. Hit subscribe and we'll see you next time.